Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast, where we answer your sales distress calls. I'm your host, Liz Hyman, bringing the rescue boat to your sales challenges. In this ever-changing sales environment, it's easy for leaders to feel adrift. We're here to be the beacon guiding you to success. Each episode, I'm joined by top sales experts and practitioners who have navigated this waters and come out victorious. Together, we'll uncover the insights and strategies that will help you hit your sales targets and grow your business. So if you're ready to turn your sales distress into sales success, you're in the right place. Let's dive into today's topic. Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm Liz Hyman, your host, and I have your crew here, Bryn Tillman, Mike Simmons, John Way, Chris Bowen, and Renee Bigelow. And we are talking about deconstructing value. And we're going to talk about value proposition for a little while. But in honor of Startup Week, Reno's Startup Week, which I've been really involved in, we are going to bring in startups into this conversation because I think one of the hardest things for startup founders to do is really understand value from your customer's perspective and how to write a value proposition that has meaning. So, you guys, should I just start with my definition of value proposition? Yeah. I do value proposition a little differently than some people. So for me, a value proposition starts with not your product. It starts with your customer's problem in their words. How do they talk about your problem? So your customer's problem in their words, how you solve it, that's your product. And why you're the best solution for your ideal customer. So you can't figure out your value proposition until you know who you're selling it to. And the part about why I'm the best for my ideal customer might include features, but it might include other things. So that's it. Your problem in your customer's problem in their words, your solution second, and why you're the best solution for your ideal customer. So that's where I start with this idea of value proposition. And I think it's really important. Bryn, hang on one second, because I see you. I think it's really important for startup founders to get this, but I also think it's important for every sales rep and every CEO and every company across the country and the marketing team to understand that value starts with a customer. Go, Bryn.
I get so excited. It's crazy. So I have a prompt for large language models, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot, which asks the following things in order for a startup to articulate their value proposition. I'm going to go through, identify your target audience, number one, yay. Define the problem, number two. Highlight your unique solution, number three. Benefits your target market will receive by working with you. What is your emotional appeal? So what do you do that gets someone to lean in and get excited about it? Credibility and proof. So what have you done out there? A call to action, because I actually think your value proposition should have a call to action. And then the final thing is, when you look at it, is it aligning with your brand? So does your value proposition, once it's written, does it sound like your brand, your website, all your messaging, your LinkedIn profiles, right? And so I love that. And I'm happy to share this.
Yeah, that would be great.
Prompt. Yep. So, yeah.
What do you guys think? Are we in alignment here about value proposition?
I think one thing that I would add to that list is why now?
Yeah.
Why do they need to act now? Because a lot of times what I hear are value propositions, which are great for down the road, for 6 months from now, for 12 months from now. And there's not enough emphasis on why you need to act now.
So it's really interesting because when I am talking about building your ideal customer profile, one of the things that I add into that is when. When these people in this industry doing these things with this technology and this geography, when this is going on with them, when they're in a growth mode, when their go-to-market strategy has changed, when they're buying a new building, right? That when matters. So adding that to your value proposition is important so that they see it, but also for us to understand they may be my ideal customer next week, next month, next year, but not today because they're not in that situation right now. Mike, you got something on your mind?
Just to add to what we're talking about, and I know we hit on it a lot in the last discussion. If you're not listening to the podcast or following the podcast, make sure you do and listen to all the episodes, and you can re-listen to those episodes. This is on behalf of the other person. It's not us. It's not our perception of value. And I don't know that I would add anything more to it than that.
Liz, I'll add on to your when. I just use a little bit different word. It might be a good descriptor for some. On my target persona canvas that I do with clients, I use triggers.
Yeah.
So they're basically the same thing that you're talking about. I mean, it can be other things like I'm in a stage versus this just happened. So like a merger and acquisition is a big trigger. A new product launch is a big trigger. There are different things that can be triggers, moving into new markets, expansions, things like that. All of these triggers create now problems, or coming right after them creates chaos, which create now problems. So I think that's just another word to say basically the same thing that you're saying that might explain it a little.
I like that. Triggers. Chris, you got something for us?
Well, I mean, I always start with the customer perspective, and is it valuable to them? Sometimes you'll get these things that are regulatory in nature or some other sort of event in nature, and you need to be able to understand what's the timeline for that if it ties into your solution, right? Because that may have a really, really small window of opportunity where other things are going to be, hey, we're transforming this particular piece, but it's vague. And if it's vague, then it's going to be like, oh, you can sort of do that at some point. The way things change these days, though, it's really, really fast. And if you think that this value prop that you just laid out 6 months ago or 2 years ago, whatever the time frame is still relevant 6 months later, 2 years later, whatever, it might not be. It very likely won't be. So being able to understand how does that have to change over time to meet your customers where they're at.
So when matters, right? That what's going on in the rest of the world matters because our priorities change. What was really important to us, and I know we're all sick of this example, right before COVID wasn't important to us 3 months later into COVID.
Or regulatory changes, right?
Regulatory changes. Oh, and Renee and I have a client that really, really got hit hard by regulatory changes, and it completely changed the landscape of their business and what was important.
Well, there's in healthcare for payers, there's a huge change coming about in 2025, but they go back for 2 years worth of data. So if you didn't make that change going into 2023, you're already going to be behind.
Right.
Right. So being able to understand that, if you're pitching a solution that's going to deal with that, if they're not already dealing with it, yeah, they're going to have some pain real soon, but most likely
or possibly if you're a company that can convert a data lake into structured data, that's a perfect client for you, right? Before they can ever use the other,
yep.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so when we're structuring a value proposition, understanding that it can change over time is really important. What about different people? So do we need a value proposition for every person that's involved in the buying process?
I wouldn't say necessarily everybody, but you should have your key roles identified as who's impacted by the change and be able to tie back what it means to them. The what's in it for me should really come back to those different individuals. So if I'm selling into the finance organization, the ultimate beneficiary may be the CFO or the CEO, but there's a whole lot of other people, maybe down in the AR or AP portion of the business or someplace else, that are going to be impacted by it. and I need to understand how it's going to impact them, because those people could potentially blow up my deal if I'm not aware of, the potential problems there.
I'll give a way I say this that is sometimes helpful for particularly startups. I usually say the value proposition is for the company, so it stays the same. But the way you word it and the context and the perspective of that value prop changes across the personas within the company.
So if you think about
Much
it
cleaner way of saying
in terms of relationship, everybody in the company has a different relationship to the problem and the solution. Somebody who manages the solution has a different relationship to the problem and the solution than the person who's actually using it. So if we remember that people that are buying from us, there are multiple buyers, they care about different things. One of my favorite examples of this is working with a young man who was a startup founder, and I said, okay, so you're going to go talk to the engineer. What are you going to talk to the engineer about? And he said, ROI. I'm like, no, because the engineer's problem is, does it fit? How fast does it spin? How much does it, what's the velocity? What's the volume? What's the capacity? Is it in my budget? Like, that engineer's not interested in ROI. So we think, okay, my value proposition is about, I'm going to, their return on investment is going to be really great because they're going to invest this much and make this much. But if I'm the one using the product in order to do my job every day, I'm not interested in return on investment. So let's.
Or in that situation with the engineer, you might end up building the Pinto, right? Where, a 47-cent piece would keep the bumper from impacting the gas tank and causing them to explode. But because they were so focused on the cost from how they had been beaten about it, they didn't put it in for that small minor piece, and it ended up costing them quite a bit.
Hey, Chris, for the younger folks on this call like me, what's a Pinto?
It's a very old car from Ford.
They were the coolest cars ever.
That is not around. That is not around anymore.
One of the things, and I think John had his hand up a little bit earlier. One of the questions that you can ask in this part of the process is when someone says no or gets in the way of getting this thing done, why are they going to say no? What's their story going to be? What's your response going to be? And let's just listen to our customers and how they position things inside their organization. They may actually use different language than you use in your company. And if you can use their language, what you'll find is they'll start nodding on their side of the table, and things will be much more relatable, and you'll differentiate yourself from others that might be involved in a competitive part of the process. The other thing on the who piece that came up a little bit earlier, especially when it comes to funding, typically the people who are impacted by the problem or care about the people who have or are impacted by the problem have money. There are a lot of people who have problems who have zero cash. They just don't have money. They're cost centers inside their organization. But if a profit center is impacted by that cost center's problem or cares about either of those, all of a sudden you can get a really interesting funding source and you can gain perspective. If you do that, you'll differentiate yourself again from the competition that's out there.
No, I absolutely agree. And so if we go back to this, your customer's problem in their words, right? So what does the CEO care about? Well, if the CEO is losing employees because they're so frustrated about something, they don't care about return on investment. What they care about is, my employees are quitting because this software doesn't work. I can't keep my salespeople because this CRM is so bad. They spend every day cursing it. Well, I'm not interested in return on investment in that moment. I'm interested in keeping my employees. Mm-hmm. If I run a hospital and the test results keep coming out wrong, or they're tainted, and we're making decisions that are killing patients. I don't care about return on investment. I care about not killing patients, because I care about people, but I also care about my ratings and my getting my my funding from Medicare and all of those things. So we tend to go in with our technology. We tend to go in with, I have a solution that will give you clearer data, more accurate results every single time. And the CEO is screaming, "Quit killing my patients! You can't bring value if you can't understand where they are in their world, right?" So how do you figure that out? How do you figure out what you should be talking about?
I think you have to understand the organization, right? You have to understand what their problems are. In a lot of places, there's plenty of ways to get that information. Some of it through LinkedIn, some of it through the website, some of it through, um, if they're a public company, any of the regulatory filings, they'll list the risks and stuff that they see in the business as forward looking statements. That should give you at least a feel for it. Then there's industry publications and things like that that'll push out different things, whether it's a particular set of problems or the next set of technologies or issues that are happening. Some of these organizations, like certainly in healthcare, Becker's pushes out a daily list. Kaiser pushes out a daily email that contains lots of information. Is it all relevant to me? Very little of it is relevant to me. But there are nuggets at least once a week that impact me, my customers, or the industry that at a minimum I can have a conversation around, right? And understand, is this a problem that you're experiencing or expecting to experience? If it's not your problem, who in your organization would be the most likely person to be impacted by this? Typically, we'd see it as this role, whatever it happens to be.
What were you gonna say? Oh,
I think that this goes back to forming your value prop, like originally forming your value prop too, which is if you're really zeroing in on your ideal customer profile and your target personas, one of the things you're doing is trying to identify for your go-to-market and create, again, especially if we're talking startup, or if we're talking kind of a transformation within a company, new product, growth plan, whatever, right? If we are doing the research at the beginning of this and we're thinking for go-to-market, who is most likely to benefit from these solutions, right? And we map those to triggers, right? That win, then we automatically have some talking points to get to some of these problems, right? I see that you've just acquired this company. I know you might be having a hard time merging two cultures. We help with this, right? I see that you you're impacted by this new regulatory compliance. We have a solution that helps you take your data and migrate it over into this new reporting format, right? Or it's something along the lines of, I see that you, I see that you have just implemented a new CRM system. We have these sales enablement tools that work well in that CRM system, right? So they've just purchased something. Whatever those triggers are, along with the research that you're doing on who's most likely to benefit now, gets you into a shorter conversation because you already know some of those most likely scenarios.
I think what's really important, what we're talking about, is listening, right? And Bryn will talk about social listening, paying attention to what's going on in people's social media. Chris is talking about doing research. Amazingly, you can use AI to help you do that research. But there's also learning. So one of the things that we do is we separate from our sales teams. We let our sales teams have communication with the customers, get to understand them, what words they're using. And that never gets back to marketing. It never gets back to the CEO. Nobody's asking, what are our customers actually saying? Somebody was trying to help me with some messaging a couple days ago. And his big thing was, well, let's talk about competitors. What are their competitors doing? And I'm like, my CEOs aren't worried about their competitors at this point. They haven't gotten that far. They're worried about utter chaos in their sales organization, not being able to predict, not hitting their revenue goals. Nobody's doing anything. We have no new clients. They're not sitting there in a calm space going, I wonder what my competitors are doing today. I wonder if I'm caught up with them, right? So when we're writing copy, when we're talking to our customers, when we're bringing value, it's because we've been really listening and learning about them. John, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, to the startups out there, School of Hard Knocks for me, the biggest thing that was very difficult for me is that I confuse value prop with feature. That's really tempting to do. And I would just think to kind of like to your point, Liz, technical founder to engineer, I'm like, oh, of course, this is value, right? You get to do this faster, whatever it is. But the person who's buying it doesn't care about that. They care about what does this problem actually solve for them. That's what they really care about. And to be able to articulate that, I really love, Mike, your comment about how do you map the cost centers problem to the profit centers problem? Because that's essentially what you're doing. You're mapping the engineer's problem back to the CEO. Like, how does the CEO see that problem? And that, being able to do that correctly, that's the value of selling. That's the value of being able to articulate that value. It took me a long time to figure that out.
It's hard.
I'll also add, Liz, you talked about like the CEO cares about people quitting, right? Not ROI. Like, I think we also have to redefine ROI as part of our value prop, right? Like, because the ROI is your employees won't quit, right? Everything you're buying is an investment. Every company in a B2B world is expecting a return on that investment. Is it cost savings? Is it a dollar amount? Possibly, but there's a through line there that you have to get through to get to that dollar amount. And in that instance, it's don't kill my patients. That means I'm going to have lawsuits. It means people won't trust me. They won't come to my hospital anymore. It means if it's my employees are quitting, it's what is the cost to replace each employee, right? Like, so there's a through line that you have to do to get there, but there is a dollar amount that somebody's placing on that investment somewhere.
Yes.
So it's the perspective of what is ROI for that person that's important.
But yes, and leading with ROI is not always the best place just because they're the CEO.
No, you can't lead with it because you don't know what that is yet.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. How do you calculate value?
You close with that, what that ROI is, not lead with it.
Based on your understanding of the math from their perspective, not your math, because heck, if I can save your employees 20 minutes a day and you have 10,000 employees and they work 20 days per month, can you imagine how much money I just saved you by doing this? Oh, come on, man. What do you think they're doing with the extra time? Saving them from what? Like all of that kind of stuff. So think about resources are things like energy. Energy is a resource, time's a resource, money's a resource, people are a resource. Like, where are we putting time, energy, and attention in the things that we're doing? And is it the right place? And I know this is going to be shocking to many of you out there. Some people really suck at decision making.
And here's what's really interesting about that. I want to take that to the next level for just a second as we wrap this up, is I bring value when I'm helping somebody make a really hard decision. If I don't think you've been listening to me, if I don't think you truly understand what's important to me and my team, if I don't trust you, if you're saying stuff and I'm thinking about other stuff and we're not connecting on it, that makes that decision that much harder. So if we go back to what we were talking about in our last episode, which is how do you bring value? We bring value by helping people make really difficult decisions. Do they trust me enough to let me help them make that decision? And if they don't, what do I need to do to help build that trust? And that's not about me, it's about them. What am I doing for them to help build trust that I'm going to help them make this really difficult decision? And they're not going to get fired or lose their business because it was a big mistake. If you haven't written a value proposition that sounds like what we've been talking about, go back and do it again, whether you're a founder or a 30-year-old company, or you've been selling for 20 years or 2 days. It doesn't matter. Go back and look at it and see if you're still talking about what matters to your customer. Thanks for joining us on the Sales SOS podcast. We'll see you in the next episode. And that's a wrap of this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. A huge thank you to our experts for throwing us a lifeline with their insights. We hope today's episode has equipped you to navigate the sales seas with confidence. Never miss an episode. Subscribe to the Sales SOS podcast on your favorite platform. If you have questions, comments, or topics you'd like us to explore, join us live on LinkedIn every second Friday, or share your questions on YouTube or LinkedIn. Until next time, keep sailing towards those sales goals. I'm Liz Hyman, your captain here at the Sales SOS podcast, saying smooth sailing and successful selling.